I'll mend the rift. The morning sky was streaked with hues of orange and gold as Kaya stood at the edge of the village, a satchel slung over her shoulder and the pendant glowing faintly against her chest. Mama Adia stood beside her, holding a bundle wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it to reveal dried fruits, nuts, and a flask of water. You'll need this for the journey, she said, pressing the bundle into Kaya's hands. Kaya nodded, her resolve solidifying. Thank you, Mama, she said quietly. Her voice carried a mixture of determination and trepidation. She glanced toward the path ahead, which disappeared into the dense forest. Beyond that lay the sacred mountain, shrouded in mystery and danger. The villagers had gathered to see her off, their faces a mix of hope and worry. Whispers filled the air as they exchanged prayers and wishes for her safety. Kaya tried not to meet their eyes, afraid she might falter under the weight of their expectations. Remember, Mama Adia said, her voice low and firm, the ancestors are with you, even when the path seems darkest. Trust in them, and trust in yourself. Kaya took a deep breath and stepped forward. The crowd parted, and she felt the weight of their gazes as she walked toward the forest. The pendant grew warmer against her chest, a steady reassurance that she was not alone. The forest was alive with sounds, birds calling, leaves rustling, and the occasional snap of a twig. Kaya kept her lantern close, its flame flickering softly in the cool morning air. The path was narrow and winding, and she moved carefully, mindful of her surroundings. As she walked, the whispers began again, faint and distant. Kaya paused, her heart quickening. I'm not afraid, she whispered, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. She gripped the pendant tightly and pressed on. Hours passed, and the forest grew darker, the canopy thickening overhead. Kaya's legs ached, but she refused to stop. The whispers grew louder, and she realized they weren't random, they were guiding her. The voices seemed to call her name, pulling her toward an unseen destination. Finally, she reached a clearing where the trees formed a perfect circle. In the center stood an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and vines. The air was heavy, charged with an energy that made Kaya's skin tingle. She approached cautiously, her lantern casting long shadows across the stones. As she reached the altar, the whispers stopped, replaced by a deep, resonant silence. Kaya placed her hand on the stone, and the pendant around her neck began to glow brightly. The carvings on its surface shifted, forming new patterns that she couldn't decipher. A voice broke the silence, clear and commanding. You have come far, Kaya of Nyasoro. But this is only the beginning. Kaya turned, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from the altar itself. Her heart pounded as she asked, "What must I do?" The voice replied, "Prove your worth. Only then will the path to the sacred mountain be revealed." Kaya's breath was shallow as the words lingered in the air. The altar's glow intensified, and the pendant around her neck grew warmer, as though urging her forward. "Prove my worth?" she muttered, scanning the clearing for any sign of what was to come. A sudden gust of wind swept through the forest, and from the shadows of the trees, 3 glowing orbs appeared, each a different color, red, blue, and green. They floated silently, forming a triangle around Kaya. Her instincts screamed to run, but the pendant pulsed against her chest, grounding her in place. The voice spoke again, calm yet commanding. These orbs represent the 3 trials: courage, wisdom, and balance. Only by passing each will the path be revealed. Kaya clenched her fists, her determination outweighing her fear. "I'm ready," she said, though her voice wavered. The red orb moved closer, its light bathing the clearing in a fiery glow. The voice echoed, "The trial of courage begins. Face your deepest fear." Kaya blinked as the forest around her dissolved into darkness. She was no longer at the altar but standing in a field of ash. The sky was a murky gray, and the air smelled of smoke. Ahead, a figure emerged, a shadowy silhouette with glowing eyes that felt all too familiar. "Father?" she whispered. The figure stepped closer, and her heart clenched. It was him, but his face was twisted in anguish, his voice filled with accusation. Why did you forget us, Kaya? Why did you let us fade? Tears stung her eyes. I didn't mean to, she cried. I didn't know how to honor you. The shadow loomed larger, but Kaya gripped the pendant and forced herself to stand tall. I'm here now. I'll remember. I won't run anymore. The shadow froze, then dissipated into a fine mist. Kaya was back at the altar, the red orb gone. The voice returned, softer this time. The first trial is complete. Prepare for the next. The blue orb hovered where the red one had disappeared, its light cool and calming. Kaya took a deep breath, her heart still pounding from the trial of courage. She wasn't sure how much more she could take, but the pendant's steady warmth reminded her she wasn't alone. The trial of wisdom begins, the voice announced, its tone measured and precise. Find clarity where the path is obscured. The forest shimmered and shifted, and Kaya found herself standing in a labyrinth of towering trees. Their trunks were impossibly smooth, their leaves forming a dense canopy that blocked out all but the faintest glimmers of light. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss, and the silence was oppressive. Kaya turned slowly, searching for an opening in the trees, but every direction seemed identical. She frowned, her fingers brushing against the pendant. Clarity, she murmured. Where the path is obscured. But how? A soft rustling behind her made her whirl around. Standing there was a small creature, a fox with shimmering blue fur and eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. It tilted its head as if studying her, then turned and trotted a few steps away, pausing to look back. Kaya hesitated. Are you supposed to guide me? She asked, her voice uncertain. The fox didn't respond but flicked its tail and trotted farther into the maze. Kaya followed, her footsteps careful and deliberate. The fox led her through winding paths and sudden dead ends, each turn more disorienting than the last. Frustration bubbled in her chest as the landscape seemed to shift endlessly. I'll never get out of here, she muttered. The fox stopped abruptly, sitting at the center of a small clearing where a smooth, reflective pool of water glimmered faintly. Kaya stepped closer, peering into its surface. At first, all she saw was her own reflection, but as she stared, the water rippled, revealing images of the village. She saw the faces of the elders, the worried expressions of the villagers, and finally, Mama Adia, clutching a small bundle and staring into the forest. Kaya gasped. They're counting on me. The fox let out a soft yip, drawing her attention. The images faded, replaced by a faint glow at the bottom of the pool. Without hesitation, Kaya reached into the water, her fingers closing around a smooth, cold stone. As she pulled it free, the labyrinth dissolved, and she was back at the altar. The blue orb disappeared, and the voice returned. You have shown clarity and focus. One trial remains. The green orb hovered where the blue one had faded, its light pulsing softly like the rhythm of a heartbeat. Kaya steadied herself, her body tense and her mind racing. She had survived the first two trials, but the weight of the final one pressed down on her like an invisible force. She tightened her grip on the pendant, its reassuring warmth giving her the courage to move forward. The trial of balance begins, the voice declared, low and steady. Find harmony where forces collide. The ground beneath Kaya's feet began to tremble, and the clearing shifted around her. She found herself standing on a narrow stone bridge, suspended high above an endless chasm. On either side of the bridge, two opposing forces surged, to her left, a rushing torrent of water, to her right, a swirling vortex of fire. The air crackled with energy, the heat of the flames clashing against the icy chill of the water. Kaya's stomach churned as she glanced down at the abyss below. The bridge was no wider than a plank, and the forces on either side seemed eager to consume her. She took a hesitant step forward, the stone beneath her feet rough and unsteady. As she moved, the voice spoke again. Balance is not the absence of conflict but the harmony between opposites. Only by embracing both can you find your way. Kaya hesitated, the words swirling in her mind. The flames licked at her left side, their heat searing, while the icy spray from the water stung her skin. The extremes were unbearable, and she faltered, nearly losing her footing. Desperation clawed at her as she clutched the pendant. "How am I supposed to do this?" she whispered. The pendant pulsed once, and a memory surfaced, a lesson her father had taught her when she was a child. "Breathe, Kaya," his voice echoed in her mind. "When the world pulls you in different directions, find your center. It will guide you." Closing her eyes, Kaya took a deep breath, focusing inward. She felt the pull of the opposing forces, but instead of resisting, she let them flow through her. The heat and the cold became sensations, not enemies. Step by step, she moved forward, her pace steady and her mind calm. When she opened her eyes, she was standing at the center of the bridge. The fire and water swirled together, creating a dazzling display of light and energy. The green orb appeared before her, its glow merging the two forces into one harmonious whole. Kaya reached out and touched it, her fingers brushing its surface. The bridge dissolved, and she was back at the altar. The green orb vanished, and the voice returned, softer this time. "You have found balance, Kaya of Nyasoro. The trials are complete. The path is now open." Before her, the forest parted, revealing a winding path that led toward the distant silhouette of the sacred mountain. Kaya took a deep breath, her heart steady. The true journey was about to begin. The forest path was unlike anything Kaya had ever seen. The trees stretched impossibly high, their canopies entwining to form a natural cathedral. Soft beams of light filtered through the leaves, illuminating the ground in patches of gold. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and damp earth, and the whispers of the ancestors hummed faintly in the background. Kaya's steps were cautious but purposeful, her hand instinctively resting on the pendant at her chest. The trials had left her drained, but the energy of the forest seemed to seep into her with every breath, renewing her strength. She could feel the pull of the mountain ahead, a silent beacon guiding her forward. As she rounded a bend, Kaya stumbled upon a small clearing. At its center was a crystal-clear pool, its surface so still it mirrored the sky above. Kneeling by the edge of the pool was a creature unlike any she'd encountered, a graceful deer with antlers that shimmered like silver. Its gaze met hers, and she froze. The deer didn't flee. Instead, it dipped its head, nudging something toward her, a small pouch tied with a thin cord. Kaya hesitated, then approached slowly. She picked up the pouch and untied it, revealing a handful of glowing seeds. The whispers of the ancestors grew louder, their tone almost approving. "A gift," she murmured, clutching the pouch tightly. Whatever lay ahead, she knew these seeds would play a part in her journey. The path to the mountain grew steeper, the air thinner with every step. Kaya pressed on, her breaths short and labored, but the glowing seeds in her pouch seemed to emit a faint warmth, as if encouraging her forward. The whispers of the ancestors were now constant, their tone urgent but clear, guiding her with every turn and step. Halfway up the incline, she paused to take in the view. The forest below stretched endlessly, a sea of green and gold. The sacred mountain loomed above her, its peak shrouded in mist. Kaya felt the weight of her mission settle deeper into her chest. "Not much farther," she whispered to herself. As she continued, the trail became more treacherous. Loose rocks shifted beneath her feet, and icy winds howled around her, cutting through her resolve. She clutched the pendant for strength, remembering her father's words, "Trust in yourself. The ancestors will carry you when your strength falters." Finally, Kaya reached a plateau near the mountain's summit. A stone archway stood before her, inscribed with ancient symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. The whispers quieted, replaced by a profound stillness. Kaya knew the final test awaited just beyond the archway. Kaya stepped through the stone archway, the air beyond it thick and shimmering like a liquid curtain. As she passed through, the world transformed. She stood in a vast expanse of light and shadow, where the ground seemed to ripple like water under her feet. The whispers of the ancestors returned, louder and more unified, their voices resonating around her. At the center of this ethereal space stood a figure cloaked in light. Kaya's breath caught as she recognized the silhouette, her father. His face was calm, his eyes full of warmth and pride. "You've come far, Kaya," he said, his voice gentle yet strong. "But the rift remains." Kaya took a hesitant step forward. "How do I mend it? What must I do?" Her father gestured to the glowing seeds in her pouch. "Plant them here. They carry the essence of balance and renewal. But you must also give a part of yourself. The bond will only hold if it comes from your heart." Tears filled Kaya's eyes as she knelt, pressing the seeds into the shimmering ground. As she did, the pendant around her neck glowed brightly, and the ancestors' voices swelled in a harmonious chorus. Light spread across the expanse, healing the rift and restoring balance. Kaya felt a surge of peace as the world began to shift back to the forest. Her father's voice lingered in her mind. "Remember, Kaya. Always remember." The path down the mountain felt lighter, as though the weight of the trials had lifted. The whispers of the ancestors were no longer distant but a comforting presence within Kaya's heart. She clutched the pendant, its glow now faint but steady, a reminder of the journey she had completed. When she emerged from the forest, the village was waiting. The elders stood at the front, their faces lined with relief and pride. Mama Adia rushed forward, pulling Kaya into a tight embrace. "You did it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "The ancestors are at peace." Kaya looked around at the gathered villagers, their eyes filled with hope. "The rift is mended," she said, her voice steady. "But the ancestors have given us a gift, a chance to remember and honor them, always." She opened the pouch, revealing the last glowing seed. She planted it at the center of the village square, where it sprouted instantly into a radiant tree, its branches shimmering with light. The villagers gasped, their awe palpable. "This tree will remind us of our bond," Kaya said, stepping back. "And of the balance we must keep." The villagers cheered, their voices rising in a joyous chorus that echoed through the night. Kaya stood among them, her heart full, knowing the ancestors' whispers would guide them all for generations to come.